Hello, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel Club. This is our September meeting because it's September, and our book is the awesome Pantheon by the amazing Hamish Steele. Yeah. You, I think you may have won the award for the furthest travel.
Really?
To come to one of these, yeah. We've had other Brits, but they've always phoned in.
I didn't know that was an option. It's great to be here. No, it's really nice. I've enjoyed being in the city, and it's all kind of come out of nowhere. I'm just starting the interview, by the way. But no, the fact that this book was something I made completely on my own to make myself laugh. Now I'm flying over here is very surprising, and I don't think this is the done thing when you have a book published. But I still like go in every shop for it and take a picture and like send it to my mom. So yeah.
Well, it turns out it's all a hoax. And no, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I mean, I thought the book was fantastic. It's funny because the way that we put together the club picks is we look through the catalog and we kind of judge from a little teeny tiny picture and just like a 2-sentence description of each book of what we think might be okay books. And then we write the publishers and go, can you send us a copy of this so we can read it? And we originally looked at another No-Brow book. I'm not sure which one it was, and it doesn't really matter. And Tucker happened to send us Pantheon in the same package. We hadn't even asked for it. And I read this and I was like, oh, this is the book. Oh my God, this is the book. This is just so funny and smart and clever. And I loved it. You guys loved it too, right? Yeah? It was a fantastic book, right? Yeah. So thank you for doing such a fantastic work. Let's start with that you self-published this originally.
Yes.
And you kickstarted it. And I kind of want to spend a bunch of time on Kickstarter, but let's not do that right away. Let's start with kind of, where did the book come from in your head? How did you think that you should do this as a laugh?
Well, it kind of started with me putting just little funny short 1 or 2 panel comics on Tumblr. I was researching Egyptian mythology for a completely different project. I've said this so many times now that it sounds like it's this big lost chapter of life, but it really wasn't. It's just, I really liked as a kid the TV show Sliders.
Okay.
About parallel universes. And I kind of wanted to do something like that after watching Sliders and realizing it kind of dated it. And so I was thinking of just like different things. I was thinking like, oh, what if there was a pharaoh nowadays? And so I just started researching all kinds of like ancient cultures and ancient ideas. And I was researching Egyptian mythology. And I realized that was a way better story than what I was planning to do. I put a 5-page self-contained little funny story. The scene when they put Cyrus in a box and throw him in a river. Hey River, it's quite a famous one. And I put that as just a 5-page comic on Tumblr, thinking that would just be the end of it. It was just a funny thing. It did end up being my most popular post on Tumblr, and I thought, oh, I'll do another one. So I read a bit more of myth and then a bit more, and I got to the salad bit and like chopping off of various genitals, and I was like, no, this has to be a full story.
Right.
This has to be told. And a turning point for me was in my research when I watched a documentary about Egyptian graffiti and things like that, and I realized that I was laughing at the myths because they were meant to be funny. And it made me slightly realize that I wasn't laughing at sort of an ancient culture. I was laughing with them. And Not to get super pretentious, but there was like a couple of moments when making it that I was quite moved at the thought that I was sharing a joke with someone from thousands of years ago. And all the research and all the Egyptologists I spoke to as I got further into the project just kind of confirmed that humans have always been humans, and humans have always enjoyed dick jokes, and always thought have always thought farts are funny, and like it wasn't that. It's a bit like I get a bit frustrated when it's a bit of a weird example. I missed a tangent, by the way, but like when people show like a Japanese game show and say, "Oh, it's so weird," like no, it's funny. They find this funny. You find this funny. You're not. It's that kind of like separation you put of things from different cultures that you. I don't understand this.
Sure.
Like, that's the joke,
right?
And just realizing that this wasn't the smart like. One of the sort of differences I think between ancient religions and modern religions maybe is that in ancient mythology, the gods were kind of cautionary tales, and they were meant to be sort of jerks, and you were meant to learn from their mistakes. And yeah, I don't know. It spiraled this whole thing in my brain, and now I'm like searching all kinds of mythologies, and really made me appreciate history and the human race and all the stuff about my stupid. Comedy comic.
Were you interested in ancient Egypt prior to starting this? Is it like something that you liked when you were a kid?
Not specifically, not really. I liked history in general. I had a really good history teacher who I had a few really great teachers that I wish I appreciated at the time. And we had one who taught us the Crusades. And when I studied history, we had two history teachers, and we had one who said we were learning Henry VII, and he said in our very first lesson, now the reason that we don't learn much about Henry VII is there's this perception that he's very boring, and that's true. And we had to do like a year of that. And then the other teacher was saying, okay, we're going to learn about the Crusades, but I don't want you to do any reading outside of the class because I'm going to tell you the story in order. And it's an interesting story because it's lots of like stupid learning from their mistakes. Not learning, but dying a lot and failing miserably. But like it's very interesting as a kind of. He told us like it was Game of Thrones. He put up all the characters on the board and said like linked them all up and told us the whole story in order, which is really rare for a history class. You're usually like it's me because at the very start of Egyptian mythology there was woolly mammoths on Earth, and at the end of like Cleopatra lived closer to now than she did building of the pyramids.
Right.
They were kind of ancient ruins to her. Ancient myth, that kind of like scale of time doesn't really get told much in history, and that one history teacher really that was kind of at the later end of my education, and that really like made me enjoy history in a way that I had whole school life. So I kind of glossed over all the fun stuff you learn earlier about ancient stuff, and it was at the end of my education that I started to history. And I don't really have a favorite time period. I just like weird stories and facts.
Yeah, no, that's good. Like that. That's good. Why comics? What is it? What is it about comics that appeals to you as a storytelling? And then as part of that, let's talk maybe about your education and how that led to comics.
So my day job is I'm more in animation. I'm currently an animation director. It's really fun. It's like thanks at the moment. But there's something about comics I really enjoy. I found that again sounds very, very pretentious, but I see myself more as a storyteller. And for something, I think with storytelling, especially if I want to make an animation, I have to get it. It takes years to make. There's so many people to prove the story. It's the culmination of many ideas. That's its own kind of interesting thing. I like with comics that essentially I don't need a budget, or I don't need every idea signed off. I can just draw my idea of my story and get it out of my head as possible. That's not saying it's the best kind of way to tell a story. Sure. And obviously, if I was working in, one of the big comic publishers, there'd be notes, all that kind of stuff. Right. But I've made various attempts to tell stories before in writing prose or doing films or all kinds of stuff. But comics remains the method in which I could get an idea to the page and out there and see it as quick as possible. Yeah. It doesn't. Pantheon as a film would be massively big budget to have kind of big battle scenes and everything, but the tone of it is a newspaper strip comic, something. Yeah. It's very small scale in terms of it's
very intimate and very human. And,
yeah. I mean, I love I love comics. I was saying to someone else earlier that I've pretty much given up other types of books because I've got so many comics now in my house that I need to actually read and not just stick on the shelf. Right. And I mean, I don't know if you wanted to actually prompt a question about education.
No, I do actually, because that's the next logical. What did you study in school?
So I did go to university and studied illustration and animation, which was a joint course, but really it was two courses that didn't have enough and didn't have enough funding, so I had to be kind of thrown together, even though they were quite separate. I did animation because I wanted to do comics, and the illustration side of things was nothing to do with storytelling and nothing to do with
still images and
I feel like I say more negative about my course than positive. I don't mean there was a lot of positive. I just think what they didn't teach really stood out because that's the thing you had to self-teach. And one of the things that frustrated me on the course was that we weren't allowed to say comic. It was a dirty word, and that you had to say, "Oh, it's your graphic novel." And I said, "Well, it's not really a graphic novel. I'm drinking a comic here." Right. I wasn't allowed to say cartoon. I had to say my film, which I would always wingly get wrong to sort of fight for it a bit.
What do you think that comes from? Do you think that's the education system, the schools trying to make themselves feel important about what in a way is sort of a lowbrow art in a way?
I don't want to speak for my teachers. Sure. I'm sure they don't think this, but as a pupil, it came across a little bit like some of them are a little bit embarrassed about the medium they'd found themselves in. I did a short for Cartoon Hangover, which do things like Bravest Warriors and Ian Puppy Cat and stuff. And I started that in my final year at uni, and I showed the character designs to my teacher, and she said, "I don't understand. This looks like a children's cartoon." I said, "Well, it is." She went, "Oh, do you want to be doing that?" I went, "I'm doing an animation course. That's the dream." And she wanted all of us to make very personal, experimental festival films. Some people in my course really got that and did pretty well with that. And I did well, but I was also saying, I want characters on lunchboxes. I want to fully sell out. I want to make some, I think she felt a bit embarrassed at the idea of anyone in our course wanting to make money from, the skill they were learning. Again, she's actually a cool person, and I loved her anytime she wasn't teaching me. Sure. I now see her animation, the London animation scene is quite small, so see her, but I got a sense that I wanted to do something a bit more commercial. Yeah. And do something new with it. And
It's interesting to me that at art schools they don't teach how to monetize their art. And it's always confused me because I thought that was kind of the point of. I mean, besides learning craft, obviously craft is important, but if you walk out of school and you don't know how to take your art and then make a living from it, how can you pick up your student loans? At least in America, I mean,
one reason might be that a few of them have had bad experiences in the thing. I know I was talking about, I had an offer from Nickelodeon to make a short film. I told one of my teachers, and they went, I tried to do something with Nickelodeon 20 years ago and it didn't really work out. I was like,
that was 20 years ago. Yeah.
Like, the person I was doing the deal with was 25. Yeah. So like, I don't think it's gonna, be relatable. I don't know. I'm what they did teach me, which I really appreciate, is there's lots of different types of animation courses, and there's ones which are very art based. There's ones which are very technical based. So our course wasn't about learning how to use one particular art program, which meant that we couldn't just sort of like fall into a job. But our course was all about storytelling and character. We studied a lot of film, much more than we ever did animation software. Or that was all the actual learning of how to do animation was assumed that you'd teach yourself in your own time, because people kind of fell into, well, I want to do stop motion and I want to do traditional. Someone's final film was a live action film, and they justified it by saying that, well, it's 25 frames a second still, or whatever. But I appreciated that it meant that I went into directing and telling stories, and the thing I always wanted to do, rather than do the animation part of things, which I work with people who do the animation side. They make a lot more money than I do, and they are always employed. But I enjoy where I am, which is kind of years of development and not being able to play around. But like constant hope and promise that eventually one day I'll get my characters on lunchboxes.
In terms of your day job and what you do with animation, are you doing storyboarding, or are you doing something higher level than that? Or
I'm currently working on two things, and one I'm very much the director for hire, and that does involve storyboard. That's the way I direct, and I'm at every stage just saying, do you want someone else to storyboard this? And say, oh, because I'm very clingy, and I don't know, a bit of a perfectionist, strangely, for very rough, ready style that I tend to do. And then on the other project, I have a bit more of a sort of, hopefully, a showrun role. I have to be kind of vague about it. I've not technically signed a non-disclosure agreement, but I assume that I should have.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm falling between various roles. Sometimes I don't quite know what my role is on things, and I end up doing a lot. Like as soon as I started actually directing things, that's when I was like, okay, I'm not doing animation because I know I'm not good at it. It's like, oh no, you're great, Hamish. Like, no, I'm not being self-deprecating. I'm being a director. I'm trying to, directing is making sure you're surrounded by people much better than you. So I the people working on my current thing are actually did the same course as me at various different years before and after, and just because they liked the actual process of animation, they're much better character animators than me. Quite often they work on my designs, which, if you've read Pantheon, are quite flat, and they're like making them all three-dimensional. Like, it's still 2D animation, but they really understand just like weight and shape. That's just not something I understood.
Sure. So what's the difference? That's badly phrased. Can you describe the difference between doing a storyboard and doing a comic? Because one would think that externally there are certain things that are really in common between, but they're very different. Yes.
Yeah, I would. Something that frustrates me sometimes about the animation industry is when I've been hiring people for jobs. There's always someone saying, "Oh, just ask them to send me your show reel." I think like, there's so many jobs in animation which don't require to have a show reel of the animation you've done. Currently, at my job, best cleanup artist around just takes all the rough animation and draws over it. I hired because she had a really good webcomic and was just great at Photoshop, and she'd never used any animation software before, but it's the same skill set. So the same as for storyboarding in that there's differences, obviously. I mean, with comics, the panel is like a certain moment in time, and a storyboard panel is a different amount of time. A storyboard panel is like is meant to show every like part of. I don't really know. It is similar. I've seen some. The one thing I've learned is that there's no actual way to do storyboards because you see the Adventure Time ones, and they're like post-it notes of stickmen, and they're covered in swear words, which they like know won't get in it. That's the kind of food. And then I see some storyboards which make me want to weep because they look like technical drawings. And I don't see. I fall into a weird slot because I don't really like to do storyboards. I like to go straight into animatic stage, where I essentially just like draw things on Photoshop and instantly dump to a timeline in Premiere. Just because I feel like a lot of the humor or mood I'm trying to make only makes sense when like the timing's there and like there's a bit of music behind it. Makes it easier to get on board with the idea. You just put a bit of like Thomas Newman in the background.
Well,
like,
so this might be the crux of what I'm trying to ask you here, and I'm probably phrasing it wrong because I don't draw myself. I only know these things sort of from an arm's length, right? But when you do an animatic and you're trying to look at timing, you're looking at things like that. The timing is very different than a timing on a page, because the timing on a comics page is where's the page turn, right? Like you've got to have all of your information at most in your 2-page spread, but usually on a page-by-page basis, right? And so how is the muscle that what is that muscle? Can you describe it, the difference between the two things? If that's a shitty question, you can say it's a shitty question.
I'm currently a little exclusive for the live stream. I'm currently doing my second book with No Brow, which isn't Pantheon 2. That will probably come later. 2. Gonna do it. Talk about that later. But basically, No Brow's publishing my webcomic, and I've found the pacing of a webcomic so different from the pacing of a graphic novel that I'm actually redrawing quite a lot of it and spacing things out, because when you have 1 page a week and then you get to put a little thing at the bottom of it saying, hey, it's the page, I thought this one was all right, but you know, I've been busy, blah blah blah, and then you get the next page. It's so different to sitting there and reading. And I did print my webcomic as a book, and the read it, like it's going like 5 miles an hour. I don't know what's going on. Well, just accept, like, if you want to read it authentically, just wait a week every page.
Right.
And like accept that this story took place over 2 years and not, you know, an hour or 2. So I think with both comics and storyboards, there's no like, it's kind of different every time. With storyboards, you can never go too far in drawing every single moment of the action. It just when you start doing loads of storyboards and having to draft them over and over again, you realize that it's wasted to go into your first storyboard and draw every single leaf on the tree in the background and color everything, trying to press them. Because, okay, nice. Anyway, here's 10 pages of notes, and you have to draw it all. And you're like, oh, okay. Next time you color it in a little less and draw less lines. And then by the last animatic is always the worst looking one. It's always the one that's just like, the character shifts in really clunkily, and I don't know. The disciplines are very similar, and I think anyone that does one can learn the other. But a storyboard isn't just a comic.
Sure,
it's something else. One of the things I find slightly tough to do with this book is it's Pantheon. It says Hamish Steele, and I get read as an artist far more than a writer, and I like my art, but there's lots of stories I'd like to tell in which my art completely not work, and to convince people that you're a comic writer if you've also done art, it seems to be actually quite tough. People don't say, oh no, we can get, comic writers are different, but I also wrote that. Yeah. So I can do both.
So what's your process from a blank page? Are you writing a script first? Are you doing thumbnails? Are you just?
I mean, I just said I was a writer, but Pantheon didn't have a script at all.
Yeah.
There's maybe one day it'll be in some museum somewhere, but there's this tatty sketchbook which is the original Pantheon, and I literally just bought a book. I felt bad about this, but then I started reading Lord of the Rings. In the introduction, Tolkien says, I wrote Lord of the Rings because I wanted to write a very long book. I went, oh, okay, fine. Because basically, I bought a sketchbook, roughly the length I wanted my comic to be. And like, yeah, that seems like a good thickness. And then just kind of like started drawing it, and then ripping out pages and stuffing them in different places and sticking other things in. I'm currently trying to do that with second. And so there's a kind of version, and I knew that the humor in this would be so tied to visuals, and there'd be a lot of visual jokes, and I didn't want to script out the penis falls into the fish's mouth frame by frame and it's funny. I just it's not going to really be funny, and because I'm the writer and the artist, because it was self-published, I wasn't having to convince anyone else that was funny. I was trying to draw faces until I laugh. And it just kind of assembled over time, and quite often I remember talking to someone about how, I'm going to attempt to draw the whole thing with everyone viewed in profile the whole time like Egyptian art. And they said, that sounds really hard. Are you ever going to not to do that? And I said, oh, well, maybe one time it'd be really funny if someone turned around and I should draw that. So I just I get a piece of paper and draw that, and then stuff it in sketchbook. So that's kind of the script. It's this horrible pencil things, and so much of it is just a square with they walk there, and it's mostly the writing. It doesn't have much of the drawing. Oh, after a while, when I realized that most of the characters would look the same in every panel, I felt like I can do a bit of shorthand, a bit of copy paste in my notes. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. But I did a webcomic with someone else, and I wrote full scripts for that, and I've written TV scripts now. And I do feel more of a writer than an artist, just because art is something I struggle with. I don't I originally drew the first 2 chapters of Pantheon in a style which was really trying to show off as an artist, and it's so embarrassing. It's it's just me thinking that more detail means more better, and it wasn't funny. Everything was so kind of it didn't match the humor. And when I started drawing the art in a bit simpler and a bit, I said before, I I use season 1 of The Simpsons as a reference, where colors are all haven't been decided yet, and I'm drawing a panel and like, God, he looks weird. Okay, this panel. Like I'm not like when the characters looked a bit off, I thought it was very funny. Like, that's when I thought the whole humor kind of came together. But like I said, I wanted to do a webcomic set on a spaceship, and then like first panel, I tried to draw a spaceship corridor, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. I guess I'll do that one day when I can just be the writer. So that's what I mean. I think the direction I'm moving in, I'll always do art, but it'd be nice to maybe collaborate as well.
Do you think the comedy works better from looseness, from sort of first drafting, or because you did Pantheon as a self-published book, mm-hmm. and then for the color, I understand that you went and redid the book, or certain parts of it.
Yeah, I mean, I redid the book mostly because past Hamish is a lazy jerk, mm-hmm. and when I did the black and white version, there was a lot of me paint bucketing in black because I needed to get this done. And then so when I came to color it in, so I knew I wanted it to be in color for lots of reasons. It always feels like it should have been. When I came to color it in and found just all these like black things I could color in, I redrew a lot of panels, and luckily the art styles doesn't take long to redraw. But I do think there's something about rougher, like in animation. I don't know if you've noticed, but all adult cartoons look horrible, but it's kind of intentional. Like, I mean, I think something like Rick and Morty has a certain design aesthetic that's nice in its own way, and like, you know, things like BoJack Horseman and Family Guy and South Park, they all look kind of gross compared to animation made for kids, and I think it's intentional. It's something that I tried to pitch an adult cartoon and wanted to look beautiful. So I think with adult cartoons, the funding goes into voice actors and writers, and they want the cartoon to look simple. It's become its own kind of style now. You can identify what's an adult cartoon show. Kid shows are all sort of lush and I just think there's something funnier if the art is its own kind of self-deprecating. It's kind of, I don't know, it's a sort of shorthand. Like I said, I drew the first panel and I wanted it to look like this. I drew the first chapter originally. I wanted it to look like this epic, like historic action movie, and drew everything in like weird detail. It was kind of funny, but then when the speech bubbles were just saying like stupid C prolapse, it kind of was funny, but then it just seems so grim and nasty. And sometimes I forget this book is like not suitable for kids, because even though it has like sex and bird sex, sex and bird sex, and like, you know, violence and stuff, I think it doesn't necessarily come across as like, correct me if you disagree, but I don't think it comes across as mean spirited, yeah, or vulgar even. Like I'm contributing to an anthology with a friend, Gaze in Space, and it features I'm getting slightly prudish and embarrassed about a makeout scene. My friend's like, your first book has full frontal anal sex, and I'm like, oh yeah, it does, but it's kind of cute. It doesn't feel like it. So I don't know. I told a few people that came up at the table earlier, but because I work so much in kids' TV and scripting stuff and getting so many notes of, oh, you can't have like a dead rat that'll upset kids, and you can't have this and that. That Pantheon was originally like my big bent of just like, I'm going to put like the worst swear words on every single page and like nudity all the time. And then that's the one that gets published, and I go on big tour around the world promoting, even though it's like, that's dark Hamish. Yeah. It's quite cute for Dark Hamish. It makes me feel care about Soul if that's Dark Hamish, but it I don't know, it's slightly atypical what I usually, but maybe that it reveals the truth.
I'm with you. So I don't want to keep monopolizing. I want to see if there's any questions here in the audience, and I already see two. So we'll do a little audience before we come back to me babbling. Sarah, please.
So you talked a lot about the sort of inherent comedy tales, and you also include moments of sort of reference comedy. And I'm wondering, kind of like process as you trying to balance, like because it feels very balanced. Like there's a good balance between like, you know, the Mrs. Doubtfire reference and like the, you know, more traditional dick jokes. So yeah, just like your process.
I mean, a Mrs. Doubtfire reference is almost as ancient as mythology. I also reference Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, that like really topical thing everyone's talking about. It's weird. Actually, both the like the Mrs. Doubtfire bit and the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire bit are actually two of the new bits. So I don't know if I was subconsciously trying to add a bit more pop culture. I didn't want to. I think part of the reason they're okay is because they're kind of slightly old references, so it feels a little bit timeless. I tried to stray away from anything really current. There is a bit in I might as well just say this. I'm currently scripting and working up a Norse mythology Pantheon. So when I keep saying Pantheon 2, it's not like, oh, another great adventure for Horizon set, which I'm making up. I'm taking the archetypes of the characters and doing a Norse one and doing all the research. There is a line in the new one when Odin says, we're going to build a wall to keep the giants out and they're going to make the giants pay for it. Which is true to the myths. That's what he wanted to do. That's the most recent. I think Set does mention things about sort of a heteronormativity. I think that's the most modern word in yeah, I think that I wanted the pop culture reference in there again in a kind of like using kind of old first few seasons of The Simpsons as my reference, where you can put a reference in, but if you're not getting the reference, it's still funny. Like the idea that also when I first wrote the book, Isis and goddess, and so I anyway, it's a bit of a weird word to keep on saying, but when she it's still funny to just see her be like, "Ooh, I'm going to use all of my subtlety," and then go like, "Ooh, I'm Annie Bottomkins," or whatever. It and like, as long as it's not instantly confusing to someone that doesn't understand, I think it's okay. You know, I started watching The Simpsons when I was too young to get all the jokes, and I still laughed as a kind of intonation of a joke, and just knowing they're referencing something is fun. I really like the TV show Spaced, and how you get some jokes and you get some references. You always get the joke, and I think it's a problem if the reference is the joke. So I didn't think too much about anything in Pantheon. I kind of just made it as I went along in my like weird script ET thing, and then did a kind of pass of redrafting it. So I didn't think too much about when to do a reference on.
Oops, Sarah. Okay. Miles?
Yeah, I'm doing Norse because I've had a lot of suggestions for different things, and there's sort of reason I did this. Because one of the reasons I did Egyptian is that there's a really solid, very clear story in Egyptian mythology. Almost everything comes back to Horus and Set fighting. And a lot of things in their culture did as well. And they had like theme of the book of balance and having their sort of role contributes to the whole world. Was very strong in Egyptian culture, and they believed a lot in trading rather than sort of currency. They had feeling that, well, my bread is going towards your part of the balance of the world, and it's just, you know. And that's one of the reasons I did Egyptian mythology, is that it had a really clear beginning, middle, and end story, characters, and whatever. So I'm choosing Norse because it also has that. I'm choosing it also. I wanted to do something a bit closer to home. I was trying to be very careful with Egyptian mythology one, because I didn't want it to feel like I was laughing at even ancient beliefs. I always try and make it seem like I'm laughing at them. There was actually a few jokes I did cut out because they were Egyptian beliefs, but they're actually still beliefs. So I cut a few things out. So I kind of wanted to do Norse because it's a bit closer to my culture, I suppose. Also because Thor and Loki sells books. But I think that would be part of the funny aspect of it. I've actually been designing a lot of the characters, and I'm going back to the myths completely, except for Heimdall, who looks exactly like Idris Elba, but like kind of like he's a guest on The Simpsons. Like he's drawn in a completely different style. That's a bit maybe a too pop culture. I'm still deciding on designs, but
is it difficult when you're doing something like Norse myth, which clearly has 700 issues of comic exist? Neil Gaiman just did, and he covered it in Sandman as well.
Yeah. Well, it is ground. I mean, again, another reason why Egyptian mythology was fun is that people don't really know it that well. I think because a lot of the content would possibly need to be changed if it was taught in schools. Norse mythology is more fun. I'm intrigued to see how much Ragnarok puts the film puts in popular culture, popular consciousness, certain characters and words and things. Interested to see the pronunciation of certain. Another problem, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I there's a few things with too many J's and umlauts and don't quite understand. But I don't know. I think it's fun to play with. I think it's fun to present something with thought in this day and age, and have doing things that Thor we all know and love would do. One of the things I'm really enjoying about Norse one is that Horus and Set are basically back as Thor and Loki, and they're drawn very similarly. Obviously without a bird head, but Thor is all big, sort of chubby muscles and a big eye, and always going like and Loki is all bendy limb. Ooh. But there's definitely a shift in the story I'm telling, and that Loki is much more the protagonist, and Thor is kind of the obnoxious jerk of the story. Just because, not for any other reason than when you're reading the stories, Loki's the only one that's making sense. And most of the problems they get into, it's like him sarcastically saying like, oh, well, we're not going to do that, are we? And everyone going, what a brilliant idea! Haha, let's do that. And then like the whole building the wall thing is literally Loki saying, well, we could get the giants to build a wall, but like not finish it, and we don't have to pay for it. And then that's everyone's plan, and then they're doing a really good job building it, and he's like, oh shit, they're gonna do it. Okay, shit. And then he disguises himself as a horse and has sex with a horse and then has a horse baby, and it's gonna be good. Yeah.
Seth.
So, question I had is, in the writing of the story, even though you're taking this from the original, were there parts where you felt you had to stretch narrative?
A little bit. A little bit. Not too much. There's a few moments in the story which I really lean into the idea that there's contradictions. Like when Thoth gets born at the end of the book, even though he's like, I was reading up about it, and I don't think the contradictions. I think the contradictions are because of how little we've discovered and how long Egyptian. I always talk about ancient Egypt, but it was like over 2,000 or 3,000 years of society and culture, and so many times pharaohs came along and said, you know, those gods don't matter anymore because I'm related to that god. And some for a big period of time it was monotheistic religion. There was only one god. That's covered in the story when Ra says that his name is Atum. And yeah, so there's lots of contradictions, but I don't blame the ancient Egyptians. I think that's probably more our fault and not really understanding. But there's still a kind of coherent story. The one thing that was kind of missing when I was researching was an ending, which is definitely not a problem with Norse mythology. They really love their ending. But yeah, it just kind of, they, you know, Horus and Set battled forever. After they stopped battling, these things happen. You're like, okay, but who won? And so I kind of used a few elements of other myths to like fill in bits. There's a bit in the book where Isis throws a snake at Ra, and she has to say his name to make him come alive again, and that's like a completely separate myth, but I just stuck it into that scene. I didn't want to fully make up anything. There's one moment where I put lasers in, and I say that I'm making it up, actually more to show that the rest I'm not. Something I cut out, but I'm probably going to put in the next one, is like someone reacting to something really strange happening by just saying like, Google it. Like, this is really how it went. So the ending was something I kind of made up in the sense that there is a myth about them going off into space, and there is a myth about them you know, dividing Egypt up and saying, well, you get 3%, and oh, how much is, you know, all of those are from myths, but I kind of had to construct the ending. And originally the ending was completely different. I didn't like this ending because it in stuff about Egypt, it too often gets contextualized from the point of view of us discovering Egypt and like of Egyptologists and archaeologists. But originally there was an ending of a Howard Carter who discovered Tutankhamun. You know what I mean. Breaking into this tomb, and it was drawn in the original art style where it was a lot more realistic, and them like going through caverns and saying like, oh, what have you seen? Oh, wonderful things. And up on a wall would be the anal sex page, like drawn completely. That was the original ending, and it was funny and everyone laughs. Right. But like I said, it just kind of, I didn't like making it all about our point of view of Egypt, and that felt the most laughing at them. So I kind of just put my thoughts and feelings as a kind of hopefully respectful sort of atheist-y, but you know, don't think about it too much point of view. I'm aware I'm doing a book about religion, but don't want to. I tried to just put my feelings about the whole book on the last few pages. I don't know. I think it's better that the comedy book ends on a kind of slightly more thoughtful note than. I don't know what people would think if at the end of this book of them laughing, there was just like another laugh. Okay, good book. I don't know. But yeah, the ending was something I had to make up with it. It was actually really fun. Like, actually, in the Norse one, I keep talking about the Norse one. It's not confirmed. Don't get scared. If nobody's watching, I'll probably make it myself, even if they don't want it. But there's a lot of myths about Thor going off to kill giants. And so I'm trying to construct it as like one big giant killing kind of spring break, kind of like, and just like plotting out. And it's kind of frustrating because there's differences about the myths. Some of them like, oh, and also this god was here at the time. So I'm doing a bit more of that this time. And I think if I continue the series and go on to more mythologies, either I'll come across ones with less structure. Like inevitably, if this went on and on, I would probably do Greek mythology, but there's just so much of it. Whereas with this, I was like trying to find anything I could to stuff in it. With Greek, I would have to be really picking and choosing.
Yeah. And would there be a difference between doing Greek and Greco-Roman? Yes. Clearly that.
Greek mythology, the special edition.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might make that into the joke. I tend to do that with problems. I just tell the reader that's the problem I had.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it too much. I've had suggestions about various that I knew a bit about Egyptian mythology when I did this. I know less than about Norse mythology, and everything else I know less and less. So if people say, "Oh, have you tried about this mythology?" I just get out my old panic. Think, "Oh, please, just let me live."
Yeah. So I've been searching, very much staying true. Humor and whatnot. You find as your stories that you tell a story script.
It's before you said the last sentence, I was going to give this answer, which is that I do think doing this book is really original, separate stories. It's definitely made me feel a bit confident about sense of. Because again, most of my writing before has been kind of pages, and it's always been funny. Tried to. But this was the most kind of honest what makes me laugh rather than what do kids find funny. And I think most of the jokes would work fine if you censored it.
Just a little, yeah.
It might be a bit. I don't know. It's been really nice to write something where the stories are written. I was talking to someone else about my friend who's written a book, a short comic, Pinkin, and on the front cover it says Pinkin. It is the same story as E.T. And it's really funny. But the thing is, what I found when reading it is that because the story is kind of done for, he shines through so much more. True. So the differences he makes is really, really clear. I did the Kickstarter, and there's quite a bit that's not in the Kickstarter versions I made for that one. And one of the scenes, like I said, the game show one, the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So that whole scene of Osiris going into the afterlife, and basically I'd made a book about Egyptian belief, and I hadn't done the weighing of the heart scales thing. It kept coming up, not as like, where was that, or why didn't you put that in? Just like, oh, I love the stuff about the Book of the Dead. I'll buy your book. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, it's fine. I was like, why didn't I put that in? And I had a character who had died, so I did that bit. So that was the closest I got to like really going off. If was just adding stuff that made sense. But Norse mythology is so inspiring because it influenced so much of like modern fantasy that reading the story, it's so tempting to go off and like turn it into this big epic, kind of straight fantasy story. I can see why Thor as whereas the other kind of mythology superheroes haven't the same.
Sure. Would you consider doing something that's not mythological, that's like, say, the Crusades?
Well, just
to tie it back to you.
I would like to do something. I am doing something kind of. I'm contributing to a book. I don't know that it's announced or whatever. I'm contributing to a book which is trying to tell the whole history of the human race, as by comic artist, and very like silly or ridiculous or blatant. And I'm trying to do Alexander the Great in 5 pages. I'm turning into a beautiful love story between him and his special friend, who he dedicated last years of his life to mourning and built a funeral pyre that was like 60, like, all this stuff. I'm doing that. It's been really fun though, because I'm learning about actual history. I'd love to do folklore. I mean, I've been kind of interested in what version of Robin Hood or King Arthur would be like in a style. And I would think with those, because they've been done so many times, I'd be more willing to kind of make up my own story. But I think the little niche I've made is going back to the myths and telling them as exactly as possible, and I think that's what's quite funny about Pantheon. So I've tried to rein myself in a bit more. Like, it's funny to me that people read it and then maybe they do go, oh, I watched not as research because the book had already come out, but I did watch the Gods of Egypt film. And finding it in like unintentionally funny when like Gerard Butler goes like, "Brother, I have brought you a box. Get inside it." And like laughing. I mean, it wasn't as exact. Just sure. I don't know. I think original stories using mythology as their base is catered to. Yeah. I think if I did King Arthur, it might be funny to tell my own version. It might be funny to go back exactly and include all sort of weird things people always cut out. They research it for their own and go, "Oh, we can't do that." Like, I want to do that.
Another question from the room? Yes.
So you're saying how you
it came from a filthy angel looking over me. I don't know. I have no idea. The dialogue in the actual script is pretty just functional. It's just you need to find Cyrus's body parts. The actual dialogue kept kind of changing over time. There's certain turns of phrases I do find funny. I'm interested actually how you read it in this room, because to me, a lot of the dialogue is funny in British accent. I really like a show called The Thick of It, UK, which kind of got remade as Beat. Kind of. It's the same writers, and it's essentially the same sort of show. And they have a very poetic type of language in how they use swearing, because it's just used in a really interesting way. Like I was telling someone earlier that one of the few times I censored myself was I changed someone saying like calling Set a bitch because I didn't like that word, to calling him like seeping bloody butt plug or something. And I was like, yeah, that's better. I don't know. The dialogue, I always wanted it to be surprising. I didn't want to copy some kind of insult I'd heard many times. Like, I think I was changing son of a bitch. It's like, that's funny in its own way, the right context, but it's not always funny. I don't want to use it to invent something of my own. Like, I don't know, have me, I'm a sex velociraptor. I've heard someone say, oh, I use that all the time. I said, oh, I don't want to know the context, but I don't know. I did think a lot about it. Kind of not really answer the question, because at one stage it's like, I didn't really think about it, and like, oh, I thought about it a lot. I didn't think about it initially, and then I go through at different stages, and then just try and like change a word, or try and make something a little bit surprising, or like taking a phrase that we might all use and just like making it go in a slightly different direction.
I can only speak for myself, but I didn't read it in a British accent.
I don't expect people to.
Yeah. I think I might have hit like Texan accents in a couple places, because that's what the characters sound like in my head. But.
I have this weird in my head. Set sounds a bit like Aziz Ansari. It's like no, like I don't know. I have that kind of. But Horace just sounds like me in my head, and I don't know. I'm glad that it works. I was a bit worried that for some reason it would translate the like intonation of what they're saying. But I watched a lot of. I also like Enthusiasm, very sweary American shows, and I just think there's a bit. You can be a bit more intelligent. Swear. So I can say that. So someone laughed at poetry. I can. So.
For your
so that was the moment I was talking about when I felt moved, because I was connecting. So those are all kind of traced from. I did make the actual characters look like mine, but yeah, they're all traced from the moments of the story, which has kind of thrown me to a different spot. Not every mythology does that, so I don't know what my chapter headings are going to be in. I'm really bad at drawing Celtic knots and but yeah, no, I a few of them I kind of twisted a little to make relevant chapters, but yeah, they're taken from Google. I just had a bit of help when I did the color version. The guy who did the introduction, Egyptologist, his name is John J. Johnson. It's a good name, but it does sound made up. At the front, I got an Egyptologist. He is real, and he did help a little bit because I was writing. I mean, I was doing the thing that I hate in films where they just write, made up Arabic or a Japanese on a street sign to say we're in Japan. Doesn't make sense. I basically did that with hieroglyphics, but that's because I couldn't find anything online that that thing you get at school where a hand means A, thing means B, like doesn't actually exist. I think the way language is in ancient Egypt is just different. It was about symbolism and mistakes, telling a feeling. There's also a clip under it, as far as I know. As far as Wikipedia told. Want to make questions into an event.
Okay, so the next thing I want to ask you about, and I may lose half the room here. I honestly might. But one of the reasons I really like doing these interviews is not just talking about process, but helping sort of future generations of cartoonists understand how various parts of the world work. So I want to talk about Kickstarter a little bit, and I want to talk about what it's like when you have an idea and you're kind of putting it out for sale to the crowd, and then the follow through. Because I imagine what I hear from anybody who does a Kickstarter is, oh, I promise all this stuff, and wow, I really shouldn't have promised this or that or the other thing. So do you have any thoughts or commentary on sort of that part of the process?
Okay, I'll make some context for why I did it. I had a few ideas for comics, and I was showing them to comic publishers. I was a little bit
Here, US.
Some UK, some I think might be US, but I didn't know. I was just sending emails out. And the thing I always got back was, you can't really get a comic made until you do a comic. So I thought I could just send like, oh, here's my idea, and here are the characters, and here's my story. But definitely for a first-time person, they need to prove that you could just do it. Also, most of I was pitching to smaller publishers, like, and they would rather pay to buy something already done than to pay for your artistic treat. Yep. Months on end. Your project. And so I wanted to get a book. I was gathering a little bit of a Tumblr following because of 5-page Pantheon box thing I'd done. Small, but substantial. And my art blog, another way in which I didn't really connect with my art teachers is they really wanted your art blog to just be your art, whereas I was trying to build a kind of following or a fandom. So my art would be, all tagged in its own section, and I had my own portfolio, but if you went to my blog, it would mostly be me like talking to my followers and posting little silly doodles I'd done and trying to like keep myself on their feed as much as possible. This is a little bit tiny. But yeah, it was all kind of coming to the head where I was thinking, I want to get a book made. I might as well do it, the one that people find funny. I've been researching this. The story is already kind of written. I don't have to think about. I thought I didn't have to think about the story. I was also at a space in my life where I had very little income, and I wanted that. Another reason I did the Kickstarter was because I was in a long-distance relationship with someone in Australia, and I wanted to get my income over the required limit to get them to come over.
Ah,
and
that's awesome.
I did, and still together. But it's dedicated to him, actually, it says. So for all these different reasons, it just kind of happened. And I did I've done 3 Kickstarters now. 1 successful, 1 not successful, and 1 is successful, but I didn't do very well, and I'm still like shipping off things. And so for the first one, Pantheon was a successful one, and I did lots of research into do's and don'ts of Kickstarter, and one of the big things is for the month that Kickstarter's running, it's got to be your job, to an extent. And there's not much you can do it,
Sure,
to a point. But yeah, I did it all, and like the big problems I faced was I did offer some rewards that ended up being quite troublesome. I offered 3 different T-shirt designs. Everyone's like, "Oh, you don't do that." Then having to do a survey to get sizes that not everyone got, and everyone wants different ones.
It sounds really simple when you like
I know,
plan it, right? But then when it comes to the execution, it just becomes preposterous.
You know, and I did all these rewards, which meant that the package I sent is so much heavier and bigger. And a problem in the UK is that most of the people on the internet are not okay. So almost all the packages have to be international shipping, which is very annoying. No offense.
Was most of your stuff going into Europe or going?
Most of it was to America.
Okay.
And like sending something in the UK is like £2. Sending it to America is about £8, which adds up.
Fast.
Especially
Very fast. Yeah.
Especially if that's another problem with Kickstarter is that you can set your estimated goal. And yeah, the people that fund you do have to pay for postage.
Right.
But there's no real, but that postage money counts towards the goal. So there's no real way of knowing how many of the back you're sent overseas. There's all kinds of math stuff that I didn't get into Comix to deal with. And I don't know, but I took it seriously and did well. With Kickstarter, I asked for £8,000. And that's another problem, is I had to deal in pounds and all the, like, oh, did my dollars work? Like, yes, and conversions and stuff. I got 10,000. But then when Kickstarter takes the money and a few other things, it doesn't feel like that. Also, both of my Kickstarters have bankrupt pretty much. You don't really do it to, I mean, hopefully that's the dream, a massive success. But you don't really do it to make money. Sure. I got that £10,000 and I was like, oh yes, drinks on me. But then the fear of like you have to do with that money sounds like a lot to make Pantheon, but that was to make Pantheon. It wasn't to print it. I was actually meant to.
That was actually my question. Is so how did you calculate that 8,000 to begin with? Was that did you think, okay, this is going to take me 6 months to draw, and so therefore I need to have this kind of an income, or were you looking at it from the other end, which is this is what it's going to cost me to print this and fulfill it?
It's tough. On the internet, sometimes people get very angry at wanting to get paid for things. Quite often Kickstarters, everyone wants to know every pound goes, a cent, whatever goes. Yeah. And the reality is that it's not always, doesn't always work out that way.
Of course.
All the Kickstarters I've been running, there's a stage in which it crosses out into my own. I'll explain my other Kickstarter because it's good to compare them. I did one for a anniversary zine to Gamera. That didn't end up being successful because everyone loves Gamera, right? If you don't know who Gamera is, that's the point. Like, that's why it didn't get successful. And then my third one was for a physical book of my webcomic. So for that one, which was successful, the book was already done, and I was just funding the printing costs and shipping it. The reason why I'm in a stage now when I haven't sent off every last reward and things is purely my own, like, I've done it before, it's fine. Like, and being a lot busier than I was, and in general, just falling by the wayside a bit. But so for that, I was funding just the printing, and for Pantheon, I was funding doing it. So Gamera is a giant tortoise that breathes fire and is in Japanese films, and I like giant monster kaiju films, and I did a Godzilla zine, which was successful, and then I did a Gamera one, and it wasn't. That's the story. Yeah, so anyway, I calculated it by just thinking I'm going to give myself 3 months off work to do it. And I didn't have a job. So
Right.
I took 3 months off the job I thought I should be doing.
Right.
And I'd done some animation work, but basically it was just like 3 months in which I can't get work. So some people and some Kickstarters, people have been very angry at the thought that I'm paying for your rent and food.
Fuck those people, can I say? No, I mean, honestly, fuck you for thinking that.
He's pointing at the camera.
I'm pointing at the camera. I'm not pointing at the audience. I'm pointing at the camera because artists should make a living. Fuck.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's. I mean, it's tough because you don't. I got suddenly so paranoid about like taking a picture of a meal I was having or showing me like at the cinema, and people think, is that my money that you're going to?
Right.
It's tough because it was your money. I was using it to live, but that was the point of the Kickstarter. And I say very upfront, I'm using this money so that I can live for 3 months while I do this book. I'm also using it to print it, and I'm using it to send off rewards and make rewards. And I ran out of money because I was enjoying the same level of life I was normally. But that's why I made it. Right. I would every single Kickstarter I do, I think I did it so differently next time.
Right.
Next time, I'm thinking that I would allot money to. Every single time, I have chosen the cheapest possible option to get it printed, to an extent, and then each time I've been kind of like, ugh, I don't really like its looks, and I want to get around to it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So next time I put a lot more money into that, and I would be a lot more sensible with my rewards.
Right.
First time around at Pantheon, obviously, I was like t-shirts, posters, everything. And with the webcomic printing, I'm going to be really smart, and most of it's going to be like commissions and digital stuff. And then I'm like, I've got to do all these commissions, and I'm not even going to get like paid for them because all this money is
because you've already been paid for them.
So different problems. I do a healthy balance. I think prints are good.
Sure.
I think the easiest reward is a free PDF comic. Like reward. But
so let me ask. So when you set your price at 8,000 was your goal.
Yeah.
Like, what did it cost you to print the edition that you printed?
That cost 2,500. I didn't need to print that many books.
Right.
I've still got.
Do you?
Quite a few.
Interesting.
Of the black and white. But not only. No, rather be nice. They say you can sell it. They just don't want me selling that book to be the first Google result. Like Pantheon,
absolutely, yeah.
Which I don't.
I wish you had brought some with you because I bet people would have bought it just for the compare and contrast.
Yeah, I mean, I might put them on my website, but I bought way too many because I thought I'd be selling this for years and years and years, and then I didn't. If I did a Kickstarter again, and I don't think I would, just because of, I think that's I used it at the stage in which it was really smart to. But if I did, it would be to make something I didn't to then published.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of reputation now, friends, and like there was like a version of Pantheon or black and white one where I just printed first chapter. So some people got like 3 copies of Pantheons, and some have like my webcomic I've released in like 8 24-page parts to sell at conventions, and some like 4 versions.
Right.
Yeah,
you gotta love those people though. I mean, they're people who double dip are actually what makes comics work. I mean, I'm similar. Just speaking as a retailer. People buy the periodical, the soft cover, the hardcover. People buy sometimes Seth. You probably bought 5 versions of certain comics, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's slightly annoying. I get it's that kind of like the only reason you're annoyed is because part of you knows you're going to buy it anyway. So it does work. It's not for me so far. It hasn't been some like clever business move. It's literally just been I printed it. Now I want to not have to individually send off the address for everything I sell, and I want to. It's actually really fun doing a project and then coming back a year later to fix all the problems you have.
That actually sounds really kind of in a way.
It is cool. I sometimes you can go a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Special edition kind of what I'm talking about. But like it's fun to just fix little things. And like I said, Pantheon I think was always meant to be in color. That was actually a stretch goal.
Yeah.
For,
Seth, you had a
Yeah, so, and forgive me if this is a question. It makes sense to, for people at Kickstarter, makes sense to so that they have some start.
I'm very impressed by people who really use Patreon. For whatever reason, I haven't quite the hang of it. I do have one. My criticism with the website is purely it's not very. It's like the worst of social medias for displaying art. Like it's just frustrating. Like I set one up. I wanted to put pages of my webcomic up as soon as I do them. It just doesn't be displayed. I want it to be displayed. But I do know some people, and that's their income. And the thing with Kickstarter is if it doesn't get funded fully, you don't get any of the money. There's other websites which do let you keep the money, but you tend to make less money because most of the 2 weeks in the middle, it says you can do it for 2 months or 1 month. They recommend 1 month. And the first week and the last week is when you get all of your backers. Middle 2 weeks are when you panic and work out your plan B. And I think it's annoyingly a lot of people don't back till they know it's happening.
Sure.
But then it's not happening unless they back.
Sure.
So, and there's certain people who say, "Oh, I'll donate this amount of money when you back or when you reach this goal," or "I'll wait till the final week to see how much you need." Because I did that with a friend's Kickstarter recently, where they have a tea company, but I don't really like tea, and I was like, all of the rewards are tea based, and I don't really want lots of tea. So, if you know, I love you as a friend, but I want to back as little as possible. Then I realized that they didn't need to give me the tea because they're my friend, and I could have backed as much as I want, and that excuse didn't work. There's some people that wait till the end. There's some people that donate straight away, and first day you make £500. Oh yes, so good. If this keeps up, like it's not how it works. So, question.
I think it was the balance. Seth's question was the balance between something like a Patreon, where you're getting an ongoing funding stream, versus a Kickstarter where you're literally funding the production of the book, the printing of the.
Used in conjunction. So,
yeah.
So instead of trying to cram in, like you said, you asked for 8, you got 10, and instead of trying to cram in, by the way, this is what I'm going to live for next. You Patreon, you so that you have a regular stream, and Kickstarter to just get the if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I think it would be while the Kickstarter's running, I would not suggest people fund it because. So recently, I put on Twitter that I'm sad and poor. Please commission me, and I was offering like £10 commissions, which is really cheap, but it was just for like little Twitter icons. And someone who meant well said, "Oh, I did one stage better. I bought Pantheon off Amazon." I was like, I don't get any of that money. Like, I'm poor now. And I think that's the thing. Like, if some people will see you're doing a Kickstarter, and it's very frustrating if you were £10 short, someone donated to Patreon instead, didn't get money. I'd keep it focused on Kickstarter while it's running. But I do think, like, it depends. Like, my webcomic's sort of coming to an end because it's been published. If I was to do a webcomic again, I would probably be better with Patreon. Make that funds it. I mean, webcomics are interesting in their own right. I'll have a discussion about. That's the thing. They don't make money in theory, and they actually cost more money to make than it seems. I made mine sort of make money because I also published it. Like every 24 pages was its own issue, and then I'd at conventions have all these issues of a comic. I wouldn't say it was a web comic. Say, oh, this is my comic. Inside it says, and read it at whatever.com. But you know, I think it's just in general. I mean, I just mentioned £10 commissions, and that makes me feel like sad because just in general, valuing art, doing art is so tough, and the pain every artist goes through when a person who's commissioning you says, "Oh, just how much do you want for it?" You're like, "Oh, every single thing I suggest is going to go wrong." They're going to say that's too much, and like usually they never do.
No, usually you have to have confidence in your own.
Yeah, but it is hard.
Creative
It's
thing.
hard to work out how much to value your own stuff when the whole world doesn't value it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
when you set your Kickstarter for a 3-month paying your living, how long did it actually take you to produce the? Was it 3 months? Were you on target there?
I was on target, but I think it took less than that because I started later. I messed about for a while, but then, you know, looking back, was that necessary to just kind of? I didn't start it straight away. I just kind of put off for a bit. That might have made it look it is.
Sure.
I guessed at 3 months. I'd never done a book like this, but I do think I'm usually quite self-deprecating, but I do think one of my skills is deadlines.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think it's my fear of disappointing people. But when I delivered this version on the day No Brow told me to, they weren't expecting it, and they said they just like, oh, okay. You sent it, and I'm like, yeah, this is the deadline. And then, oh, okay, that never happens. So that's
Is the black and white 200-ish pages the same?
It's 2 chunks are missing in the black and white version. Just the whole chapter of Cyrus going to the afterlife, and in the original version, Isis and Nephthys flying as birds, and they see the tree that Osiris is in. In the original, his box is just propped up against the tree, and they go down and rescue him. So there's like a whole little bit where he gets like put in a tree, and that was actually in the story. I just read a version that wasn't in the story and adapted that. And
let me ask the question different. How many pages was it?
There.
Yeah, like 160, 180, somewhere in there.
I think it was 2.
Oh, wow, okay.
218.
Okay. Oh, so longer than this then.
How long is that?
This is, I think it's 211.
Then it wasn't that. I don't know. I can't. It was really. It feels a really long time ago.
So I get my question then was page a day is basically what you were producing.
I was doing multiple pages a day. If you see the black and white one and really look at the art, you can tell that most of the pages are like 2 speech bubbles, or there's very few pages which are actually. I think most people, you can read this in like an hour or less. Like,
I don't know.
It's possible to read it in a sitting.
Sure.
I think it feels
Me
quite.
too.
Yeah, it feels quite. Where's the natural break point?
I don't know. Halfway through or something. I don't know.
Is there a moment when you're like, oh, enough?
No, but if you have chapter breaks, so
Yeah.
it's easy to hit a chapter and you go, okay, I got to put this down for a little while
Yeah.
and go on to the next thing.
I think if it didn't have chapter breaks, you wouldn't necessarily notice.
That's true. That's true.
It's just feels quite late.
Yeah.
And quick. But yeah, just in the art style, like when there's no when I say black and white, it's literally black and white. There's no gray. So most of the panels are just a black square with a character who looks the same as in panel and a speech bubble with nothing behind them.
So where did Nobrow come in on this?
When I was at university, we sometimes had guest speakers, and we'd always ask, "Oh, but when did you have your moment?" And then they'd always be really vague. It's always something like, I don't know why I'm saying this, but it wasn't like a natural, relatable, this could happen to anyone thing. Literally, in my TV job, the animation thing, I have a producer who produced shorts I'd been working, and he became my agent just because he wanted to go after projects which wouldn't necessarily be to do with the animation studio, because our animation studio has quite a narrow. Oh, actually, that's not true, but has a very it does a very specific thing. He wanted me to make sure I could pursue projects. And week he became my agent, I said, "Hey, this is my book. I'd really like it published by Nobrow." And then he showed it to Nobrow, and then next week signed the contract.
So can I ask, why did you want it published by Nobrow specifically? Because in the U.S. they're a relatively minor publisher.
Maybe mine is not the right word in the UK, but they are small. It's mostly, they put all their money into their books. Most of their books, I don't think they make a huge amount of money from, because they make more like certain paper quality and.
This is 211 pages, but this feels like a 300-page book, right, in the hand, you know. And actually, I really want to point out, and I don't know how much you were involved in this. This is the nicest bookplate we've had of all of them. I mean, this gold print, and this is fantastic.
I didn't even okay a design.
Really?
I just walked in, and they said, "Here it is," and there was a riot going on in London at the day, and I was a bit late. That actually is a different. Riot.
We're in San Francisco. Yeah, we do.
I just walked in and they said, "Oh, here we are," and it was huge. What was the question before that? Nobrow.
Why Nobrow? Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
It's weird because they're broadening what they make a bit. When I started uni, they had a also a nicer word than reputation. Reputation. They definitely had a publishing style. Everyone in my art course was sort of obsessed with them. So I think that's part of in the UK. If you know that there's a publishing thing in London, it's very illustrative. But their books were the first few books they were making. The ones I was aware of were very illustrative, very alternative. I think I thought mine was a bit too broad and comedic. I've seen they do another book which is called Forming.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the closest. It's kind of its own mythology. It's made up for its book. I didn't think mine really suited Nobrow. I thought it was my best shot because they were in London, and the fact that my agent would be able to meet with Nobrow, where he would other places.
The Kickstarter was done at that, right? I mean, the book was done, so you had a physical book, and so, and I guess this is sort of the last kind of thing I want to ask you. Do you think that one of the reasons that they accepted it for publication was because they didn't have to fund creation of the? And that's not that. Yeah. I don't mean that as an insulting way. I mean just from a just so other cartoonists understand how sort of this process works, right? Like
like I said,
this is a pretty high-end looking book. It's got it's fantastic.
I do wish I brought the original because it's pretty shitty. It's the cover is awful, and it's a different format. I know that American and British paper formats might be different, but call it A5. It's very much not a comic book size because I used a printing company that never done comics.
Right.
They do books.
Right.
The spine snaps when you open it. Everything's like really like falling into the gutter. I'm surprised that they saw the potential in it. I did actually send them when we pitched it to them, I sent them the book and a couple of pages colored in to say like, this is what I meant it to be. But I think they needed to see it, especially because I hadn't had a book before. Like, I don't think once you had it, it's a bit like an animation. Like I used to update my show reel every year, but now that I've done some shorts and some animations, they are my show reel. So now that I have this is my proof that I need a deadline and get a book published. Yeah. And until you have that, it's quite hard to convince. Like when we pitched this to them, I said, "Oh, I got £10,000 on Kickstarter." I don't really know how much that meant to. It's still the fact that I did a Kickstarter and I printed it, and the internet doesn't want my blood for not delivering what I said I would, was a good sign that they could trust me. I mean, they give you an advance. Yeah. So this is money which they're giving you, and it's quite a low amount. But your book has to pay that money back until you make any more money. I know you know what an advance is. I'm just
sure.
saying.
No.
So like,
for the record, I understand.
I'm assuming it's paid back because it's just going for its second printing.
Right. Is it usually signed?
I think it's doing quite well.
We bought almost 300 copies.
So eventually, hopefully, I'll start making some royalties. Yeah. But yeah, I just think I thought before I started that if I had a good enough idea, I could get a book made. But the idea is quite low on the. It's obviously important, but I don't know if there's an idea today. I don't know if there is an idea good enough from a completely untested comic author that will instantly get a graphic novel. I do think you need to prove yourself in some sense, even if it is a small, Nobrow got some on sale. They did a series of short books, and they're a good. That's being published. That's a good enough sign that you can work up through. I mean, another reason I wanted to work with Nobrow is, and I'm sure there's a lot of companies that also do this, is that they are very hands-off in terms of creators' vision, and I'd already made a book, and at the moment, I'm redrawing most of my webcomic again, and they have not asked me to do that, and they keep saying, stop. And I'm just like, no, but I need to fix it now. They couldn't be more hands-off. And I love all their work. I love all of Nobrow's books, so that's why I wanted to work with them. And I didn't really know about any other publishers. I did pitch to Blank Slate Books. Right. I sent in my, application when Pony Press was doing its entries, which billion. So maybe they'll get to mine eventually. I mean, with Nobrow, they now have a first look kind of deal with whatever I make. Well, it is good. It's good for the fact that Pantheon and Dead India, as the webcomic, fully will become a series with them. But it's not something going for other pictures. I've done a few. I did a Bravest Warriors cover. I've sent my stuff to Boom a few times, and they know me, but doesn't always. There's not always a free slot for me to do.
Well, this is a fantastic book, and I loved it, and you guys all this too, right? Yeah, and I. There you go. We absolutely want to see more. Whether it's Pantheon 2 or whatever else you do, I think you're a talent, and I think that that this is funny and fun and smart and great, and I just want to thank you for being here and coming all the way here to talk to us.
Were people expecting me to be more sweary?
No, I don't think so. No,
or funnier?
I think I was thinking I was just about perfect. So yeah, Pantheon. If you have not yet bought Pantheon, I mean, you can buy it from us. We'll have a link up there, right, Jordan? Yeah, Jordan says sure. But if not, I mean, go to your local comic shop. Even if you have to, go to Amazon. Don't go to Amazon, but if you have to, go to Amazon, because this is a fantastic, smart, wonderful book. I want to thank you, Hamish, for being here. I want to mention that next month's book, our October book, is Spinning by Tilly Walden. This one. This is a great book. This is you guys are gonna love this. You could technically pick up the book today, but we don't have the book plates, and we won't have them for another week and a half or two, so it's much easier if we put everything together. Tilly Walden is going to be here on November 12th, so this will be a Sunday night. We have not done a Sunday night appearance in a really long time. I'm really hoping you guys can all make that. We're actually on 11/12. We're also having Victoria Jameson for All's Fair in middle school, which is over there. I'm not going to grab it. That's the kids club pick. So that day we're going to have 2 amazing signings by 2 amazing cartoonists. I hope you guys can make one or both of them. But Spinning is our next book, November 12th, 8 p.m. So I want to thank Hamish for being a great cartoonist and for doing a wonderful book. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you for coming. This has been the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club. We'll see you next month.